Hi, this is Ron Darling with SNY TV. You know me from covering the Mets, and I hope you get a chance to listen to Mets Musings with Gary Mack. I had a great time. I hope you do too.
Mets Musings is an unofficial, independent podcast covering New York's National League Baseball team. It is not affiliated in any way with Major League Baseball or the New York Mets.
This is Len and Jeff from Baseball and Barbecue.
And the one place to go for New York Mets news,
Past week game reviews,
upcoming series previews,
interviews,
analysis,
opinion, and what's going down on the farm. It's Mets Musings with Gary Mack. So keep the faith, stay optimistic, and let's go Mets.
Mets Musings with
Gary Mack.
Now it's time for some New York Mets baseball talk. Here's Gary Mack bringing you the latest news and analysis from Mets Nation and the world of baseball on another edition of Mets Musings.
And hello and welcome to another edition of Mets Musings. Still in quarantine number. I don't even know what number it is anymore. How many days have we been locked up in our homes? Can't even tell. No baseball. Got so bad I was watching MLB The Show on a simulated game on SNY last night, .com, just to see some sort of Mets baseball. Can't even find the Australian baseball anymore. I watched a little bit of that earlier in the year, but we're here and we're talking baseball. And my guest this week is the Mets beat writer for theathletic.com. He is Tim Britton, and he joins me on the phone. Tim, welcome to Mets Musings.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Tim, not a heck of a lot that we can talk about, but, there's always something we can find to talk about with baseball. So, first off, how you making out? Is this quarantine keeping busy or just going crazy?
You know, it just kind of feels like a really long off season. As a beat writer, your winter is usually working from home and making phone calls and trying to come up with some creative ideas, especially later in the off season, looking forward to the upcoming season. And so that's kind of what the process is now, doing the same kind of thing. The only problem is we don't know when the season is going to come, and I already used some of those creative ideas in January, so I've got to build up a few more now.
And there's not even a lot of rumors or anything coming out. There was some talk about that realignment plan, playing in Florida, playing in Arizona. Any thoughts on that from your point of view?
Yeah, I think it's important for baseball to be thinking creatively about plans like that. The Arizona plan is sequestering essentially all 30 teams in the Phoenix area, where you have a bunch of spring training facilities. You've got Chase Field where the Diamondbacks play, and trying to play a season there in a shorter period of time. Yeah, there's the idea of teams just playing at their spring training facilities in Florida and Arizona. You'd have basically a National League in Florida and an American League in Arizona or something like that, with team switching. None of these things seem like really great ideas. I think the Arizona plan is probably a bit more realistic, just because it's a little less complicated. But the issue with that, there's a whole lot of logistical obstacles to something like that. But when you hear some players thinking basically it's that or nothing, then I'm maybe a little bit more willing to contemplate that than I would be otherwise.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, just as you said, the logistics has got to be nuts on this whole thing. I mean, how are they going to figure all of this out? Especially with some of the states that are only allowing X amount of people into to gather. I mean, we were talking about this on another episode that, like New York, for instance, yeah, they can come here and play in front of no crowds, but there's a 50-person gathering ban, and geez, you put the two teams, you got 50 people there. Not to mention security, not to mention TV cameras, because they're going to want to broadcast. And and would you guys be in the ballpark, or would you be somewhere else watching the game on television? I mean, it's really a crazy kind of an idea.
Yeah, you start to realize just how many people are involved in delivering one baseball game to fans. It's not just, you talked about the 50-person gathering ban. You've got 26 guys on each roster this year, and if we're playing a shorter, more condensed season, it's probably likelier to be 30. I've heard talk if they do the Arizona plan, it might be 40 some odd people, just because you're not going to be bringing in AAA guys at any point during the season. So that ups the number of people you've had. You have staff. Even your coaching staff is about 8 to 10 people these days. You've got your health and training staff. You've got people who feed the players. Then you've got your broadcast crews. You've got your media. You've got the security at the stadium. You've got, I don't know if you're going to have fans in Arizona in smaller stadiums. Probably not at that point. But you might have to have people, vendors and things like that. So the number of people you're sequestering in something like that starts to get larger and larger. It's not, if this is the NBA trying to do a playoffs in Las Vegas like they've talked about, that's 16 teams of 12 players. Mm-hmm. It's not 30 teams of 30 players or more, where the numbers really expand on you pretty fast.
Right, and then they were saying the Arizona plan, they're going to play triple headers at well, I still call it the Bob, but whatever they're calling it now, the ballpark there. But then you've got people in and out of the locker room. Are they going to be able to sterilize it between each game? I don't know how they. I don't even know.
Yeah, and like the biggest step that baseball needs, and that, I mean, you could probably say American society needs at this stage, is more and quicker testing for everyone.
Yeah.
Because any plan for baseball hinges on the ability to, if anyone gets this coronavirus, if anyone comes down with it, to be able to quickly separate them from everyone else, mm-hmm. and to not shut everything down for a 2-week quarantine.
Right.
And you can't even really contemplate this error. That's kind of a built-in assumption to the Arizona plan, or really any plan to have baseball in 2020, is advances in testing will allow this to happen. And we haven't seen that yet across the country, and that'll be, if that happens, then I think we can really start to seriously contemplate a couple different plans for how to get baseball back. But until that point, it's all just kind of exercises in theory.
Any gut feeling when, if at all, they could possibly begin this season?
I would be surprised if anything happens before the quote-unquote all-star break, which mm-hmm. was, is July 13th or so. I think as time has gone on, I've gotten more and more pessimistic for reasons we're talking about, for kind of just the magnitude of challenges, right. Logistically and health-wise that every sports league faces. When everything was kind of postponed in mid-March, my thought was, the NBA and NHL will be back basically in time for their playoffs. Maybe Major League Baseball starts in late April or something like that, or certainly by Memorial Day. And I wasn't thinking at all about the NFL for college football being in trouble. And now, whether we have a season, I'm probably less than 50% optimistic that we'll have a 2020 baseball season at this point. And if we do, I think it will be probably a large amount of it without fans, and will happen later in the year than any of us were hoping for.
And then it brings up the question: are we going to have a minor league season as well? If they're not playing in front of fans, I doubt if they were going to have like a minor league season going on also.
Yeah, I think whatever percentage chance you think there is that there's going to be a major league season, I would at least have that about the percentage chance for a minor league season, because you're right. There is some motivation for Major League players and Major League owners to have a season even without fans in the stands. There's still money to be had there that's meaningful for both sides. Whereas from a minor league perspective, if you're going to be playing in Lakewood, New Jersey, or Kane County, Illinois, and you're not going to have people in the stands, there's maybe not as much. That doesn't really do a lot for you as a minor league owner if you've got to pay to operate the game without fans. And the players themselves are not protected by the union. There's not as much at stake. There's not as much to gain for them in that situation either. So I would be. I think at this point I'd probably be really surprised if there is any semblance of a minor league season this year.
Now the owners agreed to count service towards players, and I don't know why. To me, I don't know why the owners would agree to that. I know they don't want to. They don't really, with the agreement coming up in a couple of years, I know they don't want to fight the union too much. But I don't see how that helps the. Well, let me say this. I see how it helps the players on one hand, but on the other hand, I don't see how it helps the players because you get a guy like, let's say Porcello now with the Mets. He had a bad year last year. If he doesn't pitch this year at all, he goes into free agency next year. What has he got to build that on? Go ahead.
Yeah, like I think for players, service time is maybe their number one priority because it's you build your entire career off of that clock, basically.
Mm-hmm.
If you're Pete Alonso, your thought process when you get called up on opening day 2019 is thinking, okay, I'm going to be a free agent after 2024. You're doing the math early in your career to know when, it's not just when you become a free agent, it's when you get paid through arbitration 3 years in, it's all of that. And so delaying that for a year for everyone would leave you with an entire union of disgruntled players.
Right.
Even more so than them not getting paid, what they were expecting to get paid in 2020. I think it would make for a very strange free agency this winter. A guy like Mookie Betts who gets traded to the Dodgers, might not even play for them before becoming a free agent.
Yeah.
He's a guy who's thinking about trying to get a $400 million contract or something coming into the season, and now with the economics of the game being in a stressed point at the end of this year, probably might have to rethink that. Maybe he signs a shorter term thing to hit free agency again. A guy like Porcello, like you mentioned, it'll be harder for him to get the same exact deal that he got last winter.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think, everyone's going to be in that position, basically.
Right.
So I don't know that it hurts him specifically more than anyone else. If he had a better year in 2019, sorry, I'm getting confused about years. If he had a better year in 2019 before on an absence of a season in 2020, I don't know that guy is making more money than he would have otherwise.
Right.
It's just going to be really confusing. A free agent period if there's no season, and then you've got the backdrop of collective bargaining negotiations for next winter beyond that after 2021, and maybe it'll be more favorable to be a free agent then, maybe it'll be less favorable to be a free agent then. There's a lot of complicating factors there that would make it a pretty fascinating winter this upcoming year.
Boy, this really threw a monkey wrench into everything.
Yeah, you plan for a lot of contingencies when you're a sports league or you're a professional athlete or a professional franchise or, a beat writer living in Queens. You plan for a lot of different things. Sports not happening for months on end and maybe for an entire season is not something that was necessarily on the break glass in case of emergency list.
I said to my wife last night at one point, I was so desperate, I was watching the MLB The Show, the game the Mets were playing. They were broadcasting on SNY.com, and I said, look at how desperate I'm getting here.
Yeah, there's there's only so many simulations and old games that can get you through this at this point.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about the Mets. Noah Syndergaard, of course, with the Tommy John surgery. I have a buddy of mine that's been predicting this for 5 years, saying the way he throws, he's going to have to get surgery. And now it come to pass. There's actually a chance now with him getting his service time. He may never throw a pitch again for the Mets. It's feasible. Some guys miss 2 years.
Yeah, and there's a couple different ways of looking at it. He's had his Tommy John surgery essentially right around the same time that Zach Wheeler had his. When you go back in 2015, and Wheeler, of course, missed 2 years. And then wasn't quite the same even that third year back
right.
In the rotation 2017. But Syndergaard, he's still under contract through 2021 with the Mets. So if he's able to pitch next year, if he's able to come back a little bit quicker, maybe by June or July, he could still play a part in their season. At the same time, the Mets could look at where his recovery is at in November or December, and if they don't feel good about it, they don't feel like they want to pay him. He'd have to make at least $10 million next year in arbitration. If they look at that and say, you know what, we don't feel like we want to pay $10 million for maybe 8 to 10 starts at the second half of the season or something like that, they could theoretically non-tender him and make him a free agent this upcoming winter. I wouldn't expect them to do that. I think that would be, I think Syndergaard's potential to be an impact pitcher, even in a small sample, is too big to make that kind of decision. But it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility.
And then think of that. That's an excellent point. And the other side of it now, who replaces him this year if we have a season? And going forward, we're not going to have a pitching staff next year unless Brody does something. Because with Stroman, Waka, and Porcello all being free agents, we go back to what you said earlier. This is going to be an interesting winter.
Yeah, so I think we'll focus on if there is a season in 2020. Michael Wacha slides into that rotation, and that's the good news about having 6 legitimate major league starters with some track record in spring training for 5 spots. One of those, we always say that those things kind of take care of themselves, and for the Mets, unfortunately, it took care of itself in this way with Syndergaard going down. I think the bigger concern for a potential 2020 season is you're going to be playing a lot of games in a small amount of time, probably. You talk about double headers some days. You're probably not going to have as many days off as you would otherwise. So having actually a 6th starter rather than just your usual 5 probably be really beneficial. So if the Mets have been able to keep all that depth, they might be in an advantageous spot compared to some other teams that only plan for 5. So now you're talking about whether it's Walker Lockett or Steven Gonsalves or David Peterson or Corey Oswalt making a few starts for you over the course of an abbreviated 2020 season, in a way that the Mets didn't have to dip to a 6th starter most of last year. And then trying to rebuild the rotation, you're right. You've only got DeGrom and Matt locked in beyond this season and healthy for the start of the 2021 season. So you probably have to go out. You hope that someone like Peterson comes through and presents himself as a regular rotation option for 2021. Another part of this that's difficult is this is a guy who's thrown, I think, like 110 innings as his high in the minor league. Generally, when you're introducing guys to the major leagues for a full season, you want him to be able to throw 150 innings, and he's going to be operating off a smaller base number this year. He's not going to get to 100 this year, so it'll be tougher for him to make that innings jump next year, and maybe you've got to kind of massage his innings a little bit more than you would a normal pitcher. So that is another complicating factor for not just Peterson, but for a lot of guys across Major League Baseball and how you're planning for your 2021 team. But it would mean probably for an active offseason for the Mets in terms of locking down a couple pitchers to go into next year with more of a complete rotation than they have right now.
And for all we know, a Porcello or a Waka may want to stay here, especially maybe a guy like Porcello if they make him a similar type of deal because he's a New Jersey guy and it's his home, it's around his hometown, so he may want to stay here with the Mets. And any chance that they could move Seth Lugo into the rotation?
Yeah, that's an option. I was actually talking with someone from the Mets front office a couple weeks ago about, when Syndergaard went down, they had talked about Lugo and Robert Gazelman as guys that were kind of prepping as starters at the start of the offseason before they added Waka and Porcello. They said, can you put that back on with them at this point? There's so much uncertainty about when the season's going to come back. Would they have time to build back up to that? And this person was saying, they were still prepping basically to be multi-inning relievers, to be guys who could get you 6 or 9 outs in a game. So it's not too difficult for them to build back up, especially given that there's going to be a good amount of time probably between now and the start of the season to build back up as starters if they wanted that. So I think that is an option for the Mets. Lugo, we've seen he's excelled in the bullpen the last 2 years, but he's also pitched pretty well in the rotation when he's gotten that opportunity in 2016 and in 2018. 2017 was a rougher year, obviously.
Yeah.
But I think you're pretty confident he could be at least a league average starter, if not better than that, in that role. So that's another option, especially when you look at building that 2021 rotation. I think that they could go down.
Mm-hmm. Now, on the plus side, there is a plus side for this delay. Michael Conforto should be healthy, I would have to say. And maybe even Yoenis Cespedes. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, this gives those guys a chance. Conforto especially. Oblique injuries are difficult to get over, but I think by the time we're getting back to a modified second spring training, he should be just about all ready to go. I think that was the type of injury that would have probably kept him out until right about now in the actual schedule. My concern was always that they were going to try to rush him back a little bit because obliques you've got to be super patient with.
Right.
And fortunately for him, he's got plenty of reason to be super patient right now. With Yoenis Cespedes and Jed Lowry, the good news is you've got more time. The bad news is you don't have the full ability to work your way back in the way that you would if you were at a facility every day, working with the training staff with people rather than on your own and just kind of getting guidance from afar, which is my understanding for guys across the game. So I'm not sure if Jed Lowry is able to, talk to the guy talk to people who are trying to build him a sleeker knee brace. If he's able to try different things out, or if it's all kind of on hold for him right now. That's a question I don't know the answer to. But those guys should be closer physically to a return if and when we get back to baseball this year than they would have been on March 26th when the season was scheduled to start.
Now, you mentioned Jed Lowry, and he's kind of the forgotten guy because we didn't see much, if anything, of him. We saw very, very little. He had that enormous knee brace on. I don't know how he could play with that, having bad knees. But if we have a season, are we going to see him at all, or should we just essentially write him off?
I think with Lowry and Cespedes, you go into whatever season you have this year thinking anything we get from them is a bonus because of the magnitude of injuries they're trying to overcome. It's Cespedes coming back from missing a season and a half. It'll be, by the time we're actually playing baseball this year, it's going to be 2 years since his last major league game, probably. And with Lowry, it'll be a year and a half since he's been a regular at the end of the 2018 season. Yeah, so these are big injuries that are difficult to overcome in any circumstances, let alone these. So I think you look at them as bonus performances, and that's kind of looked at it that way in the offseason. They built their roster where if those guys don't play, they've still got a pretty good lineup.
Right.
With Lowry, he was on more of a regular schedule in spring training, but that knee brace was pretty noticeable. It was about as big as I'd ever seen on any athlete, let alone a baseball player.
Yeah.
So it's something you can't imagine him sliding into second base with that on his leg. That's a terrifying thought. He was looking for something that was less bulky, that gave him kind of the same comfort with his knee. At that point, at the point in spring that we were there, he was saying, that the knee brace allowed him to kind of feel like himself. And with it off, he didn't quite feel as comfortable in the field or at the plate. So it's trying to find that balance between something that gets you back feeling yourself, but that also allows you to do everything on a field without getting in the way. So, I think this is still a guy who's not that far removed from being an all-star in 2018 with Oakland.
Right.
But you can't, there are scenarios in which Jed Lowry is a really important part of this team in 2020. I don't know that they're likely or probable, but I think they do still exist to some extent.
Right. Well, because, especially in a short season now, as you said before, there's going to be a lot of games, maybe doubleheaders. Guys are going to get tired. They're going to have to expand the roster, and he could have a bigger part to play, maybe as resting a Cano or resting a McNeil or a J.D. Davis, and it certainly it makes the keeping of Dominic Smith now look like a good move, because you don't know what's going to happen in the season, and they're talking about the possibility of even a DH for the just for this year only. Though I cringe at that, and I have a feeling that if they do it for 1 year, it's never going to go away. But I think this team is a really good team and could really contend. It's just a shame that this had to happen.
Yeah, the depth is really important if you're playing kind of a sprint rather than a marathon, and that feels a little counterintuitive. Because, you generally think, over 6 months, 162 games, you're going to need all these guys. But if you're trying to cram 100 games into 3 months or something like that,
right.
Then you really do need to have guys to spell, you're going to have to give more regular rest, not just the older guys like Robinson Cano, but also to Jeff McNeil to keep him off his feet. Pete Alonso's not going to be able to play almost every game at first base. You're going to have to give those guys more of a rest, keep them fresh, and keep them productive. And then I think another concern coming in is, depending on the length of whatever spring training is, you've got to worry about maybe injuries being a little bit more prevalent than they would be otherwise, because guys have kind of built themselves up to be almost ready for a season, and now they've taken a step back. And then if you're going to do spring training for 10 days or 2 weeks, you got to build yourself up pretty quickly then, in a way you're not really used to get ready for the season. So that's, pitchers have to be worried about trying to go too deep early in the season and having their arms ready. Hitters have to worry about, you're not really seeing live pitching for months on end right now. It's even worse than a normal off season. There's only so much you can do on your own and react to on your own. So I was talking to another baseball writer yesterday, and he said some players are concerned about, their obliques as a hitter, because that's something that, it's built off of your reaction speed. You might not be able to practice that or work on that for months at this point. So all of that means that having a Dominic Smith as a backup option, having maybe a Jed Lowry as a backup option, having Jake Marisnick in the outfield, those kinds of things could be helpful for the Mets if we're playing a short season later in the summer.
Well, it all makes sense to me, and boy, I certainly hope that we get some baseball back soon, so you can get back to work. I know you've got to be itching to get back to work, and we all want to read your stuff again. So I want to thank you for coming on today, taking the time, and let's just hope for the best outcome.
That's all we can do at this point. Yeah, we're all. It's always exciting to reach opening day of the baseball season every March or April. But I think this year, if it's July, if it's August, if it's November, it will be really exciting to be at a baseball stadium for an opening day.
Yeah, I think even if it snows, people won't care.
Yeah, if there can be fans, they're even better. So we all miss this sport, and we're looking forward to seeing a real live version of it on our TVs soon.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Tim. I really appreciate it, and please take care of yourself, and hope you'll come on again sometime.
You too, Gary. Thank you so much.
And I'll be back right after this.
Looking for great Cardinals talk? Then check out Conversations with C70. My name's Daniel Shoptaw, and I talk with some of the great bloggers on the internet today about their teams. It always comes back to the Cardinals. Find the latest episode on my website, www.cardinal70.com, or at baseballpodcast.net.
Baseball and BBQ, your place for interesting baseball talk, opinions, and history.
Baseball and BBQ, your place for barbecue recipes, tips, and interviews from the world of barbecue. If you like baseball and if you like barbecue, then tune in to Baseball and BBQ. Find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and BaseballTalkRadio.com, along with Mets Musings and other great baseball podcasts.
With all the Mets news, it is the news from around the world and around the corner. Here's Gary Mack.
And we're back, and I hope you enjoyed that interview tonight with Tim Britton. Wasn't he terrific? And gave us lots of great information. Let's just hope, like we all are hoping, that we get this season going and getting it going soon, because we're all getting a little shaky. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this week's show. I hope you enjoyed it, and I want to thank my guest Tim Britton once again. He was terrific, and I want to thank you all for listening. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen or watch the podcast, whether it be YouTube, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Castbox, tons of other places, wherever you watch or listen to the podcast. Hit the subscribe button. That helps me grow the show and expand to new listeners. And until next time, remember, keep the faith, stay optimistic. Let's add a few. Sanitize, use hand sanitizer, wash your hands, wear a mask in public, stay 6 feet away, and let's go Mets. And I'll see you next time on another edition of